back to day 2 of Event Tech Live. Thank you for joining us here on the Event Tech Talk stage. You know, you can see that I went out for a couple of drinks last night, right? Anyway, I'm Cecilia, and I'm the host of this stage for the rest of today as well. The stage is sponsored by InEvent. So you can find some lovely swag on the chairs if you would like to take that away with you. Before I introduce the next session, a couple of housekeeping rules. If you want to submit any questions to the panel, you can do so online by joining this lovely site via your web browser, and then go into the session, or we will take some Q&A at the end of it. But without further ado, I want to introduce the lovely Sledge team who's going to talk about events and film, how to make them work for you. Over to you guys.
Thank you.
Hello.
Just checking, this is weird. Sophie, you need to wear.
Can
Hi.
everyone hear?
Can everyone hear us okay?
Thumbs up if you can hear. There you go.
Good, okay, fabulous, thank you. Okay, so we are talking today about events and film and how to make them work for you. So, there's no denying that film plays a really important role in every event, regardless of the format today. And when incorporated into an event strategy, it has the power to drive greater engagement, deliver powerful analytics, and a wealth of amplification opportunities. Now, looking before COVID and before the lovely pandemic hit us, you could look at the role of films within an event to be viewed as standalone pieces, used predominantly to highlight a theme in event, whether that might be through stings or highlight reels or opening videos. These were particularly common at award shows and internal conferences. And at other times, film content that might have been commissioned separately might need to be added to an event, but it might not have been designed or constructed in a way that was designed with the overarching theme in mind. So not quite woven into the rest of the experience.
And then kind of during COVID, we saw that content was really the only way that we could communicate. Obviously, very much at the start, we didn't have the in-person events that we all love and that we're all used to. So, you know, having that content, it was the only way that we could communicate. So it had to have a strong narrative, it had to be exciting, and it had to be different. And it kind of led to us, you know, having better expectations of the content for them to be a bit more broadcast-led and kind of like a TV-style piece. At the height of the pandemic, it kind of quickly became clear that the conference call style of events weren't really sufficient from an engagement perspective. We're also, you know, conscious that attention spans were dropping, and people were very much, you know, used to this 2D Zoom style piece, and I think Zoom fatigue sort of started to creep in. Attention spans reduced quickly, and you know, they just weren't really cutting it. I think post-COVID though, and you know, coming out of the pandemic, video still remained a key driver in terms of telling a story. It had to be, you know, it was a bit more creative, and we're seeing a lot of demand from companies that, you know, they want video, and it is very much still a staple piece of an event.
So to be able to achieve the right balance of events and film, this begins right at the briefing stage. So my role as a producer is to bring the creative concept to life, and that's meaning it's on brand and on budget, working with the timelines given, and most importantly, meeting the client's objectives. Now, during the initial discovery phase of any project, I'll be unpicking the objectives and looking at the audience. I will take any initial ideas and collaborate with Ben to see where these can be developed, and looking at whether there are any moments within an experience where film can play a part and really enhance the story or the experience. Now, from a creative perspective, I'm focusing on the messaging that we need to get across and how we're going to share that. So looking at whether we are talking to a large group of people all at one time in one space, or whether we are teasing people before an event with quick reels to capture attention, or if we're even drip feeding information to build a story. And while it might seem a little obvious, filming for the right size of the screen is pretty essential. Not all screens are a 16:9. Many are different sizes or orientation. So if I recognise for a particular event, obviously, if the size of the orientation of the screen is going to be different, then I can flag that with Ben, who can make sure he is capturing content in the right way for the event.
Yeah, then working closely with Becca, my role kind of then looks at how we tell that story, specifically, you know, what creative techniques that we can use and technical ways to really enhance the film. Here I might consider things such as, what camera we might use, because certain cameras are of course better for, different shooting formats, different codecs, different frame rates, etc. And kind of like Becca was just saying now about the screen sizes, a project that we recently worked on, the LED wall was 11,000 pixels wide by 1,000 pixels high. So it was very much looking at how we can maximize that screen's real estate and how we would shoot for that. Outside of shooting, we'd look at kind of creative assets and what creative assets we can use, such as motion graphics. If it's quite an information heavy topic, we might want to kind of set the scene with, say an opening video where we kind of put those stats to the audience and put those figures straight in front of them to kind of, set the scene and kick the event off. In addition to that, looking at kind of the more conventional film production pieces, I'll look at requirements such as what crew, what location we're shooting at, and just generally bring the production together from a film perspective. So all of that is then looked at in the planning stage, and I think the planning stage is definitely one of the most critical parts. It's just as important as having the fun part of going on set and shooting, and the edit when it all kind of comes together. Looking at one of our clients, Creative Head magazine, they are a hairdressing publication. So as you'd imagine, their events are slightly different to your general sort of corporate piece. They're much more editorial, they're much more creative, and they're much more beauty led and very much focused on the finished looks that you kind of see at the bottom right of the screen there. So these projects involve, or these events involve, a lot of live photo shoots. It kind of gives the hairstylists a chance to, come together, showcase their work and showcase their creativity amongst their peers. It is a live event, however, so the footage that we gather on site is very critical and is very much a focus of the event. So a lot of, planning has to be mapped out before we arrive on set or on site. So what sort of considerations do we have to think about before we arrive on set for these sorts of events? So if we look at this particular case study with Creative Head magazine and Weller, for this we really wanted to plan how we would set the stage. We designed kind of a small set for the kind of people to play with. You had your models, you had the hairstylists who were kind of up and coming influencers in the hairstylist world, and then the lady kind of second from the left there was kind of their mentor or ambassador for the brand that we were shooting with. So we wanted to incorporate a bit of height into this kind of finished shot for the event. The shooting style was also important. The theme for the event was Instagram-worthy looks. So we kind of planned to give the models the cameras and let them shoot it to give that kind of handheld kind of look for the kind of finished product. Speaking of cameras, we had to plan the type of camera that we wanted to use. Being about hair color particularly, although it's not really showing great on this monitor, we had to have cameras that would have really accurate color rendition and also be able to shoot in high frame rate so that we could do those lovely hair swooshes and finished beauty shots and kind of home in on the techniques that the stylists were doing. Considerations into lighting were also made. So we shot with we used the Aperture 300D to light the set, and that was really nice because it gave a really nice, accurate daylight balanced light. And we used the light dome and the lantern to give a really nice diffused look across the models. In terms of the interview, as I said, where we had kind of these up and coming people, we also had our mentor, so we kind of did a fly on the wall style interview where the mentor was really quizzing and drilling down the techniques that the stylists use. And then secondly, these type of events are very much a conveyor belt, if you like. When one model is finished and ready to come out for their finished photo shoot, another model is out the back still being prepped in hair and makeup. So it's very much a conveyor belt type scenario. So we had to plan how many camera operators we needed and how we'd actually capture it. So that involved us having 2 camera operators on the main set and then 1 camera operator out in the back to capture all the sort of behind the scenes prep stuff.
And then we also need to consider the on-site production for filming events, and for many of our projects where content is really key to the overall experience, there will be an element of bespoke footage that needs to be captured, which will involve filming on location. By having that robust plan in place, that is ideal because we know how we need to capture that content, and then we can focus on elements such as the location, the equipment being used, and our talent to get the most exciting content. Now, a recent project we worked on was for a government department called BEIS, which is the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. They tasked us with helping them to launch a new government initiative called the Fact Dialogue. Now, this event was very much focused on educating the wider public on the importance of reducing deforestation around the globe, and the work that was being carried out to achieve this. This topic is extremely important. I could probably bore you lot for quite a while on this. It's become very close to my heart. But the language that is generally used in these types of initiatives is very policy heavy. It can be very difficult to digest. And with this event being aimed at the general public, we knew that this event needed to be executed in a really creative way to be able to engage people. So our concept involved some key requirements. Firstly, it needed to be accessible in tone and language and showcase as many of the different voices from around the world who make up this dialogue, and being able to reach that global audience that this event was being streamed to. So we used animation to set the scene, and right at the beginning we went back to basics and gave a really informative, clear manner of what the problems and the challenges we face. As mentioned, we wanted to use really simplistic language to break down that heavy messaging. And to do this, we invited a group of primary school children to take part in the event, and we challenged them to pose questions to some leading businesses, which included M&S, Nestle and McDonald's. And really, let's face it, give real honest and brutal questions to these businesses that we all really want to hear. Next up, we had Julia Bradbury as our main host, and we wanted therefore to leverage her professionalism and her TV experience and build this whole event with a TV style concept. And to do that, we broke the event down into segments so that individually they'd be really entertaining and informative, but collectively they'd tell a really compelling story. And lastly, with lots of information for this event, all very informative, we wanted to break it up a bit. So we created some ad breaks and some fact checks, which would bring some truths and maybe some common myths around the topic of deforestation. So for this, we had a really strong concept, and to be able to execute this, we needed to capture a majority of this content bespokely. So we decided on a location to shoot, which was Kew Gardens, with the importance of nature surrounding this topic, and the work that is actually being carried out at Kew. The scientists there, they are working on extensive research around the problem of deforestation. So it was the perfect link and the perfect backdrop for this event. Now, Kew Gardens is very beautiful. We're all very pleased to go down there for a day in July to capture all of this content. However, being on site and filming in a location does come with real considerations. So, Ben, can you tell us kind of what those considerations might be?
Yeah, so shooting outdoors comes with a lot of considerations that you kind of need to think about before you get on site and how you can adapt for this type of shooting scenario. An obvious first one being in the UK to start with would be weather. So of course, as Becca said, it was July, it was the middle of summer, it was lovely, it was a pleasure to be there. But we had to have a weather contingency plan. If it were to rain or we weren't able to be outside, we needed to have a location that was either undercover or indoors to shoot at, that still showcased the beauty of Kew. I think secondly, we didn't have the luxury of shutting down the whole of Kew Gardens like some big productions would do, so it was very much still open to the public. So we had to be mindful of continuity, setup times, and just the fact that we didn't want to ruin people's day as they were going to Kew Gardens in the middle of a film set. Thirdly, the location of Kew is, of course, under Heathrow's flight path, so certain considerations had to be made when it came to the recording of sound, being a very dialogue-focused piece of content. Access and managing the sort of on-screen talent around, such a large site was also key. We had a green room for talent to kind of arrive into and kind of a base for us to operate from. On-site logistics and timing were also, very critical. Again, such a big site, so we had a fleet of buggies to kind of cart us around with the kit, the crew, the talent, etc. And it really helped us, move around the site on time. Speaking of being, on time, a precise production schedule that was developed ahead of the shoot was also very critical. Time is of course money, so we needed to be on time in the sort of segments that we were filming. The production schedule was of course not in the order that the film was edited in, so we had to be mindful of certain continuity. So if the host picked up from a certain point, that may not follow that in the edit. So we had to think about how they were picking up certain points in their scripting. We had various participants involved in this production. We had a confident TV host. We had primary school children who can ask and will ask anything. And we had big global, brands on screen that, were really conscious of their image. So we had a lot of different, personalities and different people with different interests to kind of deal with, across the shoot. And we only had limited time with people. This panel, for example, the 3 people on the panel were only available for 1 hour on the shoot day. So it really was a one-take wonder. And I think that was probably the most interesting panel of all of them. So those kind of, location-based and talent-based considerations that need to be made. I think a lot of this can be mitigated with, equipment and crew considerations. So an obvious first one might be sound recording. Having a dedicated sound recordist and a sound assistant is, really, really helpful when filming these sort of events. It meant that all of the on-screen talent could have an individual microphone which recorded, individual tracks that we could then tweak in the edit if there was anything that we needed to remove or, fade up or fade down. And it just, alleviates having, the sort of camera crew having to deal with sound as well. Speaking of cameras, we considered what sort of camera we'd actually shoot the event on. For this, we used the Sony FX9, which was quite a new camera at the time, and it was a pleasure to shoot with. We considered using this because it had better battery life. It had massive V-mount batteries, so it meant that we weren't having to run around Kew Gardens trying to find power and recycling through batteries. In addition, it's got much better cooling, so middle of summer outdoors, it was going to get hot, but not as hot as the 40-degree greenhouse that we were filming in there in like 100% humidity. So whilst the cameras didn't melt, we certainly did. In addition to that, we also have built-in ND filters on the camera, so it kind of gives sunglasses to the image sensor, so that we still get that nice shallow depth of field, but we're not blowing out the image. And then because we had a hard get-out time of 5 p.m, we needed to have fast hard drives so that we could back up the footage nice and quick, and get off site on time as well, and make sure that everything is all nicely secured back up, because we did shoot a lot of terabytes of footage through that day, being in 4K. But altogether that came to a 70-minute piece that was live streamed on the COP26 YouTube channel. It was amplified across various cross-government channels and business channels across social media. So that's kind of the production, and I think looking to the next stage, which is post-production and kind of post-event as well, I think the editing process is just as key as the pre-stage and the production stage. There's many sort of technical, visual and creative elements that come together in the edit process. It really is you've got your sort of canvas and you're kind of painting the picture at that point. When it comes to editing, you can pre-plan the process. It's not a case of just getting there and then firing up the hard drives and thinking, what the hell do I do with all this footage? Everything is storyboarded at the beginning, and it can help us to keep on track to make sure we're still reflecting of the original sort of overarching story that we intended to tell.
So taking a case study, which is an event we worked on for HPE, we were tasked with transforming an annual sales kickoff for internal staff, and historically this event had been a little bit death by PowerPoint and not the most engaging, so we were asked to shake it up a bit and come to them with a fresh approach. Now, very quickly understanding that the sales teams are a lively bunch, they like a laugh and they're always up for a bit of fun, it really meant that our approach to this event and the tone and the style and the language that was used really needed to engage their fun and lively personalities. So we decided to approach the whole event with a TV-style concept, leveraging well-known TV shows as backdrops for content and learning segments. So it was a live event, it was in person for 350 people, but the content was specifically important, so the way that we were going to deliver that was crucial. And essentially, what we really wanted to achieve was to make sure that it was completely different to previous events, and it was really playful to the team's personalities.
And yeah, I think kind of expanding on what Becca's just said, the whole film and content and TV style approach is really kind of a way to kind of, really bring that out of things. So you can have a lot more fun with it. We came up with sort of narrative-led pieces that were, played on the culture of the company and the characters that were within the company. It meant that we could be entertaining, we could be comedic, and we could kind of create these memorable moments. After sort of constructing, a full plan, a script, and kind of how we wanted the event to flow, it was then, came down to the edit process where we really, had the finished article brought together. This kind of first example is, an A-team style piece where we can kind of, portray content through sort of more theatrical and fun means, and the style is kind of recognised by, a lot of people. We can have fun with, the sound effects, the different, motion effects that appear on the screen. And yeah, I think it's just a really nice piece that was recognisable to the audience at the time as well. In addition, we also did this kind of phone jacker inspired piece where you can kind of use imagery and that kind of 2D effect on screen to kind of bring that to life and tell the story in a fun and comedic way with the voiceovers. And that's kind of a great way to tell the story, as Becca was saying, with the sort of death by PowerPoint thing. We can be a bit more playful in the scripting and bring that together nicely. And then finally we did a kind of through the keyhole segment where an employee went to a director's house and was kind of milling about, and there was various clues around the house and they had to guess whose house they were in. I think something else to touch upon in the edit as well is that they wanted them shot in 16:9 so that they could be used across various other outputs, social and internal comms, but then we kind of layered them on the very, very wide letterbox style, because I've forgotten how big the screen was, but it was very, 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 very wide. So yeah, that kind of helped for kind of using the content post-event across various other channels.
So really what we've said is films can play a really crucial role in events to really build a story or experience, and developing a strategy right at the beginning is the best way that you're going to achieve the most out of them. So just some top takeaways from us of how to get the most and how to develop your strategy. Make sure that everyone is aware of your client objectives. That's really key. Make sure that any film that you're bringing into an event has a purpose and a meaning for being there, and it's going to enhance the story or the experience. Make sure you're developing that story with the customer journey in mind at all times. Have that robust plan right at the beginning to make sure that you can achieve that end vision, and assign a dedicated event and film team experts to this project.
And then kind of building on Becca's conclusion, I think it'd be good to look at some, trends that, we're seeing and, what is here to stay really. I think where we touched upon the animation stuff at the beginning, I think the technology behind animations, be it 2D or 3D, the art direction behind them is really, really improving, and you can get some brilliant stuff from animation and motion graphics. So I think they're great in terms of being used as supporting material or as standalone pieces to kind of kick off an event, to really distill down the information of information-heavy topics. In addition to that, I think accessibility and inclusivity is really, really a key driver to an event's overall success. With hybrid kind of here to stay, we can reach much more global audiences now. So I think designing an event and the film and content that goes with it, with accessibility and inclusivity in mind, you're kind of making it brilliant for everyone. And I think finally we're going to see a bit more of the immersive technologies, and I'm sure there'll be bits around here to see today as well. But I think extended reality stages and digital sets are really key to the future, or a key thing that we're going to see in the future. They kind of build upon your traditional green screen format that you might see, and they really transport the audience and the hosts and the actual theme into a 3D environment that we can move around and really make it more of a broadcast feeling event. But yeah, whatever is next, I think the role of film and events are forever going to be strongly linked together as we go into the future, and they become more intertwined. And overall, they're going to offer audiences the best possible experience.
Thanks all.
All right. Do we have any questions from the audience? No questions? Well, I have a quick question. So you just mentioned accessibility, right? And you've gone through that, all the equipment that you have is, I can assume that's quite heavy, quite bulky. How does that work in terms of accessibility? Do you think the equipment is going to move forward and become more portable? And, where do you see that going?
Yeah, 100%. I think you know, the power of, you know, cameras and the tech that we shoot with is, you know, getting more and more powerful, but smaller and smaller. I had it the other week where we do a lot of government work, and we was filming an important sort of bilateral meeting between certain countries, and the video team weren't allowed into this room because the camera looked like a photography camera or something. So yeah, it was a bit annoying, but oh well. But to touch on that point that you made about, you know, accessibility and the portability of equipment, I think it's, you know, it's going to get much more powerful and much smaller.
Yeah, because it's all about the quality, right?
Exactly.
When you're doing film and you're doing video, you have to have high quality, and for that you need the right equipment.
Yeah, definitely.
So, any other questions from the audience? Ben, Becca, thank you so very much. That was very interesting.